What is going on, YouTube universe? Welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, where we discuss everything Australian rules football, and with another round of AFL action in our rearview mirrors, we now have the time to sit down and unpack all that action in another edition of the round recap, which is going to undergo another shift. I think what we're going to do from now on is, if there is any big stories that have come out of the week heading into the following week, we're going to discuss those at the start of the video, then dive into the previous games, and then, do my votes and my team of the week and all that at the end. And there are two big stories to kick off this video. The first of which is going to excite a lot of Carlton fans, because Carlton have found their man. They have locked up Josh Fraser as their senior coach heading into 2027 and beyond, which I think was all but a formality. Given what this man has done in such a short time frame, it just made sense that he would transition from interim coach to senior coach. And I feel, even though he began this journey as only wanting to be that caretaker, as it's gone on, he's been bitten by the bug. He's fallen in love with it, and just what he has done with this team and the way Carlton have turned their season around under his tutelage is nothing short of absolutely sensational. Miracle work even. Just 1-8 after 9 rounds. And last weekend, having drawn against the Bulldogs, they have locked up a wildcard spot which could see them play finals this year, which the AFL are counting the wildcard round as finals. I personally am of the take that that's a separate round and it's the final 8 teams that are in finals. Feel free to argue that all you want. Schematically, however, the AFL do have wildcard round as a wildcard final. So do with that as you will. But while that news is huge for Carlton fans, the AFL has been rocked by one of the biggest scandals we have had, not just for 2026, but in recent years. And I wasn't going to dive into it, but at the point of me sitting down and recording this video, sanctions have been laid by the Sydney Football Club against 5 players who have been allegedly involved in a sexual and or physical assault of a woman. We're not going to get into semantics. Innocence until proven guilty is something that we firmly should be standing by here, but the rumors that are circulating and some of the evidence, maybe, I don't know. We don't know whether this is all fabricated. We don't know whether, just the rumor mill is churning. We don't know whether some of the information that has come forward has been faked, but it is pretty damning if what is being reported is true. And the 5 players that have been named are now sitting out the remainder of the 2026 season, including finals, which to me, given the star power of the 5 that are named, this puts a line through Sydney's season. They are not winning a premiership without these 5 players. Nick Blakey, James Jordan, Riley Bice, Chad Warner, and Isaac Heaney. Absolutely huge. Now, Nick Blakey's management tried coming out and saying he wasn't involved, he's got nothing to do with this, so he was removed from the equation temporarily, but he has been included in the 5 that have been suspended. There is talk about the fact that some have only been suspended because they were out late. There's talk about potential drug use, and then obviously these sexual physical assault claims that have been made as well. It's absolutely wild. And this is a sanction that I believe Sydney has imparted on these players. So the AFL are yet to step in and do anything. And to think we had Isaac Rankin miss 5 weeks due to a homophobic slur, but these Sydney boys essentially are only missing what? Sydney, they finish second. If they win their first final, they go on. So maybe 3 or 4 finals games and this week, so they're going to miss the same amount for alleged sexual and physical assault against a woman. I think there needs to be a harsher stance, especially if any of these men are proven to be guilty of the claims that have been made. But we'll let due course run its due diligence, and this is a story that obviously a lot of AFL people are going to be invested in, whether you're a Sydney fan or not. This is huge. This is big. This is blown up. Some think that it's been blown out of proportion. Some victim blaming and trying to divert attention away from the boys. Some people are wondering why the football media have tackled this from why have these boys done this on the verge of finals, and kind of left the victim out of the equation. It's been tackled many different ways, and any which way you kind of want to piece it together, it doesn't look good in any way, shape, or form. But we're going to leave that behind. Those men will not be featuring for the rest of the year, and I just think Heaney and Warner out of that midfield, Blakey and Bice out of defence, and then having James Jordan, who was one of the best downright lockdown defensive, taggers in the comp. Those five heavily compromise that Sydney lineup, and I don't see them doing anything impactful during the finals run without their input on game day. But alas, we move on. Round 23 has been done and dusted, locked away, leaving only one round in the home and away season left. And this round gave us some outcomes that have been spoken about for many different reasons, some of which I'm still kind of a little bit perplexed about and kind of scratching my head over, which we will get into momentarily. But this round kicked off with what I perceived to be potentially one of the games of the round. Could have had potential to be one of the games of the year. Fremantle hosting Adelaide at Optus Stadium. Fremantle have been the best team in the competition this year, but Adelaide have been the number one pressure team in the competition this year, and I really felt these two teams going head-to-head at this point in the season would determine and at least showcase to us where these Giants stand when it comes to the finals makeup. Obviously, finals football is a little bit different to home and away. Some people rise to the occasion, overperform, and some systems obviously are going to hold up better than others. But it was Fremantle in this particular outing by 24 points in a game where Adelaide weren't without chances to win, and they wrestled momentum back well, Adelaide, but it was again a final term dominance from Fremantle, which has been their bread and butter throughout the 2026 season. And any time they have looked down and out, a final quarter performance from them has gotten them over the line more often than not. The only time this year I feel that they have failed to deliver in that aspect was when Melbourne defeated them a couple of weeks back. But the match timeline, arm wrestle and a half. At quarter time, Fremantle led 5-4-34 to 3-3-21 in a quarter that Adelaide led for most of. At halftime, Adelaide managed to bring it back 7-5-47 to 6-6-42, only trailing by 5 points. They got back in front at numerous times in the third, but it was still Fremantle 11-10-76 leading 10-9-69. And the final term, as I said, Fremantle just ran away with it. Adelaide were able to draw even keel early, but the trajectory of this scoreline just kept going up and up and up. 16-16, 112, defeating 13-10, 88. And as I said, that final quarter, breaking down the statistics, Fremantle won the clearance battle 14-3. At centre clearance, they won it 7-1, outscoring the Crows 15 points to 7 from that particular source. And just being able to lock the ball inside their forward 50 just off of defensive turnover was the absolute downfall of Adelaide in this game. They weren't able to get out of Fremantle's forward 50. Just when you're able to as easily lock down intercepts like Fremantle were, they're going to put you to the sword more often than not. They have got many different threats over the entire field that they can get the ball into the hands of, and you're going to get put to the sword. And this was without Murphy Reid playing in this team, who's potentially going to miss this upcoming week as well. Probably a good thing. I'd say keeping him fresh and bringing him into finals ready to go is going to be very critical to Fremantle winning a flag this year, which is huge considering he's only in his second year of football. I think what this kid has been able to do in such a short amount of time is nothing short of brilliant. But 28 forward half intercepts Fremantle registered from this game, and from those 28, they scored 16 times, 6 goals, 10, 46 from that source. In comparison, the Crows were able to have 18 forward half intercepts, 10 less, but they only scored 21 points. So they had half of the intercepts, they scored half of the score. And Adelaide have been one of those teams this year that have been able to capitalise on that kind of scoring chain, putting pressure on in forward 50, turning the ball over, getting secondary looks, because again, they are a team that possesses plenty of talent and well enough to be able to maintain that possession and get the ball into the hands of absolutely great users. But Fremantle too good in the end in the opening match of the round. I'm not sure about injuries here, which we will check, and there were none, which is fantastic. Always good to see a clean bill of health coming out of a game, especially with two teams that will be featuring in finals this year. It's just a matter of, at this point in time, where Adelaide finishes, because Fremantle cannot lose top spot. So they have locked up a home final at Optus Stadium in week 1, and then provided they win that, they're going to be back at Optus Stadium in a prelim, and then they're looking at walking straight into the MCG. They have set themselves up for a huge premiership tilt this year. Breaking down the team statistics, Fremantle led the disposal count 353 to 320. To no surprise, the most dominance came from their handball game, leading 163 to 112. Disposal efficiency, Fremantle actually ran 9% better around the ground, 77%. Adelaide only managing to run at 68%. Inside 50s, both were really average. 50% from Adelaide from 46 inside 50s and 53% from Fremantle for 60 inside 50s. So 14 more looks, but they only won by 4 goals. So Adelaide probably lucky in the end that Fremantle's inside 50 efficiency was rather low, because they should have won this game by a much bigger margin. Having a look at the stoppage game, Fremantle dominated the hitouts 54 to 39. The clearance game was won 44 to 38, with the biggest gap being at centre clearance 17 to 12. Uncontested possession. And this is where Fremantle have mounted their run and carry game and have set up this new purple haze style of football. 210 to 167. And that just leads into those intercept marks taken in that forward half, being able to chain the handballs together, getting the run and carry game going. More often than not, they absolutely open teams up. And the only team so far in recent months that has been able to stop that was Melbourne. Being at that Melbourne Fremantle game live, I was able to see how players like Jai Amos and Josh Tracy kind of set up a kick or two behind the ball, so when that counter punch comes, when they look for that rebound work, they have players already out the back ready to go. But teams haven't been quick enough to isolate that, to cut them off at the pass, and that's what Melbourne was able to do. That has been Fremantle's downfall, and I have said throughout the course of the year, when it comes to Fremantle, their run and carry game is a sword they're going to either win by or die on. And teams need to start cluing on to how Fremantle's run and carry game is going, because that is exactly how you stop this team from winning games. And no one's doing it. Melbourne did, but outside of that, not even the number 1 ranked pressure team for 2026 was able to lock them down. And this was a game where they had 75 marks apiece, so they broke even well under averages for both teams here, both averaging over 90 marks a game. And it was just more potency with ball in hand from Fremantle here, just to be able to get scores to, 72 to 58 tackles when they led the disposal count. Just Fremantle came to play in this game. This was a statement piece that needed to be made. And yes, maybe performed a little bit better because they're on their home deck, but they needed to solidify belief once more into their systems, and they did that emphatically in this game in the end. Again, should have been a game where they won by a lot more, considering they kicked the 16 behinds. And when you have a look at the fact that Josh Tracy only kicks 1 goal for, Luke Jackson normally hits the scoreboard, only kicks 2 behinds. Hayden Young only kicks a behind. Patrick Voss, who has been a revelation this year in their forward half, only kicks 1 behind. These are players that we expect to see kicking goals. This could have been and should have been a 7 or 8 goal win in the end. So Adelaide probably, clutching at some straws and saying their prayers, because it should have been a much bigger blowout. Having a look, though, at the players that I voted for best on ground, I have seen over the course of the week already, like after the games have been played, like SEN and Triple M, they'll announce like their players of the round. And I'm starting to question the selection process when it comes to that, because they had Caleb Sarong as the best player out of this game. And I've only given him 1 vote, and that is coming from, obviously I'm not a media expert, I'm not an AFL journalist, I'm not claiming to be either of those, but from a perspective of being able to sit down and watch an entire game of football, I just thought his impact was less than other players. He wasn't the best Fremantle player, let alone the best player on the field. And that's where I'd like to know your take at home. Obviously, all these votes that I give out and the discussion points I make are all from my own objective point of view. And that is going to be different to each and every person that watches a game of football. So the comments are always open. If you agree, if you disagree with anything I say, let's talk about it down below. Let's get some discussions rolling. But as I said, Caleb Sarong gets the 1 vote from me. 29 disposals, 13 contested, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 12 clearances, 536 metres gained, 2 goals, and 9 score involvements. I gave 2 votes to Luke Jackson. I just thought his ruck work, his clearance work, his ability to get first hands on the ball around the stoppage game was truly pivotal to driving Fremantle home. 20 disposals, 8 were contested, 3 marks, 9 tackles, 33 hitouts, 5 clearances, 243 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. And best on ground in a couple of back-to-back weeks. This has been rather huge from Rankin. 39 disposals again, 15 contested, 9 marks, 6 tackles, 10 clearances, 719 metres gained, 1 goal, and 13 score involvements. What did we learn out of this game? We learned that Fremantle's systems still hold up as the best as long as they are executed correctly. Come finals, if they come up against somebody who's able to chop them off at the pass and stop this rebound game from working, is this going to see Fremantle fall flat on their faces and not even make a premiership? I think the fact that they've clinched that minor premiership spot, that number 1 mantle, is going to help them get to the grand final, and they shouldn't miss from here. They should at least feature in the grand final. Whether or not they win is yet to be determined. But what did we learn about Adelaide? Their pressure's been great this year, but unfortunately sometimes it's a little bit too and far between, and we know their best can compete against the best, but when they're not up to the challenge, when they get opened up as easily on turnover as they did in this game, that starts to become a little bit worrying. And I know they've got some players out, some players definitely coming back in, make them infinitely greater. But it's a matter of trying to shake the monkey off the back heading into a final series. After last year, we saw them finish in that number 1 spot and bounced out in back-to-back weeks. Could this come back to haunt them at the back end of this season? Remains to be seen, but both of these teams will be featuring in finals this year. So if you are a Crow, if you are a Docker, strap yourselves in, because it's going to be a rather turbulent ride. Next game, Saturday, because it all kicked off. Did I say it all kicked off on Thursday night for the last game? If I did, I apologise, because there was no Thursday night football. That last game was a Friday night game, because this one kicked off on Saturday. St Kilda, Richmond, MCG, in Dion Prestia and Nathan Broad's final game as Richmond Tigers. Now, as far as I know, Nathan Broad is retiring and could potentially be stepping into a coaching role at West Coast or Fremantle, potentially back in Western Australia. Dion Prestia, while he's finishing up at Richmond, feels his body is still right and ready to go, despite my personal take being he's just too susceptible to soft tissue injuries. He might be looking to go and play on for at least another year or two, which, good luck to him if he can find a contract to do so. And I thank both of these guys immensely as a proud Richmond man for everything they have done for our club, especially through the dynasty that we built. But this was a hard watch for many reasons. Richmond were very insipid in the contest and just outbeaten in many, many facets. But the one thing that has perplexed me and pissed me off the most, and I'm going to be perceived as a typical Richmond supporter who's complaining about the umpires, right? And feel free to think that while I undertake this discussion point. But every AFL show, every AFL or media expert that has spoken about this game have all thrown Richmond under the bus, saying that it was disgusting that the effort that they put up, they should have done more to see Broad and Prestia off in a higher light, and I agree to that fact. But nobody is talking about the adjudication of the umpiring in this game. Richmond had one free kick in a half of football. They finished at three-quarter time with 3 free kicks, the second of which was only paid halfway through that quarter and was met with Bronx cheers from the crowd. You would have thought that a debutant had kicked his first goal with the noise of the cheers that came when Richmond was finally paid a holding the ball free kick. Now, we finished with 11 for the game, and I feel those 8 that were paid late were an effort to try to close the gap in the free kicks that were paid so it didn't look so sizable. And St Kilda finished with 10 more in the end, which was the gap that was at halftime, 11-1. My thought process behind this, and you can disagree if you choose, that's your prerogative, but even if a team has players that are getting off the chain because they're not having any attention put into them, don't you think any team would look untouchable if their opponent is getting no free kicks? Like, holding the ball becomes non-existent, pushing in the back was gone, throwing the ball was gone. That means the team that isn't getting penalised is getting free rein to continue moving the ball. And obviously, Richmond, with only getting that one free kick paid, had no way to physically wrestle momentum back. They were laying tackles, they were applying pressure, and when the game was still at hand and could have been won, nothing was going their way. And in the moment, the Fox Footy commentators were up in arms. Jason Dunstall was just talking non-stop in the moment about how Richmond are getting absolutely nothing, and then St Kilda would get paid a free kick for exactly what Richmond didn't get prior. And that, just as a fan, and not even as a Richmond fan, because we've seen over the course of this year, the adjudication of certain rules have gone certain ways in games. One team gets the better rub of the other. And I feel as a competition, as a much-loved game of our nation, it is getting so fucking frustratingly hard to watch when two teams get adjudicated differently. I go into each and every game as a Richmond man, not expecting big things. I knew this year was going to be rough. We've been hit from pillar to post with injury, and we're lucky that we haven't had any more go down and compromise our list even more, especially at one point where we had gone through every AFL listed player and we didn't have any AFL listed players playing in our VFL. We had gone through everybody, and that could have compacted a hell of a lot more, so I'm thankful it didn't. But going into games like this, when it's so harshly adjudicated one side, how are you supposed to get excited? How are you supposed to thrive in a game? How are you expecting your players to perform at a consistent level if they're not being rewarded for the pressure that they're laying on? I argued that against Adelaide. I'm going to argue that more so against St Kilda, because one free kick and a half of football is absolutely abhorrent. And I don't understand why this hasn't been pointed out by anybody that has spoken about this game. Everybody's talking about how dominant St Kilda were, how terrible Richmond were, but we're not going to talk about the fact that Richmond couldn't pay a free kick if they had a briefcase with $1 million. I mean, there's even reports that the umpires were getting booed off after the game and the umpires were laughing. They thought it was funny. So that's my take. We're just going to run through this game real quick, because as I said, it was an insipid performance. We lose by 49 points. Don't get me wrong. It was St Kilda, like, confidently after quarter time. But again, the gap gets put on when pressure isn't rewarded, I suppose. Match timeline: 1 goal for 10, trailed 3-20 at quarter time. Half time, the match timeline: St Kilda led 3-2-20 to 1-4-10 at quarter time. 7-6-48 led 3-5-23 at half time. 11-9-75 led 3-9-27 at 3-quarter time. And 14-10-94 defeated 6-9-45 full time. St Kilda kept their finals chances alive with this game. Obviously, that's not how it fell by the end of the round, but they won all 4 quarters and won the contested possession count by 44, which is a season high for any team and their best differential since 2025 round 8. We had to go back a season and a half for St Kilda to register these numbers. it was a hard watch, but it was frustrating at the same time, because you look through it through my lens, and you're coming into this game thinking we put on plenty of pressure against Adelaide. We should be up to our necks in it, given, Nathan Broad and Dion Prestia are playing their final games. We'll rise to the occasion. And just, we were getting our hands on the ball, but we were making silly mistakes and some turnovers. But the pressure we were mounting in some instances, just play on, no calls made, and it was just getting frustrating. You could see Toby Nankervis gave away a 50-metre free kick for dissent, umpire dissent, for arguing with a non-decision. And even though Nankervis gives away plenty in the ruck contest or whatever may have you, dissent isn't something that Toby Nankervis ever gives away. So you could see that even, it was mounting with players of his maturity level. So I can't dwell on it. We got to move on. Otherwise, I'm going to sit here and people are going to say, oh, we're tuning into another video from Trent, who's just sitting here fucking carrying on about the umpiring again. I don't want to make a habit of it, but the umpiring this year has been terrible. And if it is not fixed going into next season, I feel we're going to have more and more complaints each and every week. And it's not the only game over the course of this weekend that had terrible adjudication either. So we might come back and talk about umpiring once more, but breaking down the team statistics, St Kilda 452 disposals to 335. They had almost 100 more kicks. They had 30 more handballs. They only had 13 more inside 50s. So again, Richmond were getting plenty of looks, but from their 47 inside 50s, they only ran at 31% inside 50 efficient. From the 60 that St Kilda had, they ran at 43, which is bigger than what Richmond did, but still down on their overall efficiency for the season. And Richmond ran at 71.9% disposal efficiency, which was only down by 5% comparatively to St Kilda. So again, we had looks, we were clean, but just the uncontested ball was way too easy for St Kilda to run out. There were certain players that weren't getting attention paid into, and again, in critical moments, I feel adjudication let us down. That's just my personal take. Not at all saying the umpires cost us this game, because Richmond shot themselves in the foot. We had plenty of looks. I'm arguing that it's hard for a team to be competitive when they are heavily adjudicated against. And that's where I think I'm drawing the line in the sand, because I know Richmond have been bad. We were terrible in this game. But to suggest that we weren't against it in that department, I think is a bit ludicrous. In the stoppage, St Kilda did win the hitouts 43-42, but dominated clearance 45-31. At stoppage, they won at 36-22. Contested possession, they won by 44. Uncontested possession, they won by 75. They turned the ball over 4 more times than we did too. That's what I'm saying. We had plenty of looks. 121 marks to 89. They had almost 100 more disposals. Well, they had more than 100 disposals. How much more disposals did they have? Yeah, 120 more disposals. And yet they laid 28 more tackles than we did. We just didn't live up to the expectation. We fell way short. And it was probably our worst performance of the year, which is upsetting because we come off a game where we almost beat Adelaide and should have beaten Adelaide. And then we dished this up. Continuity has been a big thing for Richmond this year. We play well one week, even if we lose. We've shown great signs against teams like Adelaide earlier in the year, against Brisbane. And then we come up against St Kilda and get absolutely fucking flogged. I don't know. I digress. Let's move on. Obviously, 3 St Kilda players are getting the votes from me in this particular game. Mitch Owens gets the 1 vote from me. 14 disposals, 10 contested, 7 marks, 1 clearance, 242 metres gained, 5 goals, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. The 2 vote I'm giving to Brad Hill. 41 disposals off of half-back. 2 of those were contested. So he filled in for Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira in taking kick-ins and getting all that easy kind of rebound work off of half-back. But still, no mind was getting paid to him. He was being that driving force out of half-back. Nobody put any effort into trying to shut him down. And that was one of many blemishes on the face of this game. As well as his 41 disposals, he had 11 marks, 710 metres gained, 1 goal assist and 10 score involvements. Best on to me was Max Hall. Would have to be in conversations as one of the most improved players in the competition this year. 40 disposals, 9 contested, 10 marks, 6 tackles, 3 clearances, 616 metres gained, 1 goal, 4 goal assists, 12 score involvements. What did we learn? Richmond, even though there's shining light at the end of the tunnel, continuity is our biggest issue. And even though in the post-game press conference, Adamuse actually said he was embarrassed and he took aim at Richmond players for the first time, which was great to see a tactical change in that aspect. But there seems to be nothing coming from him that suggests that there's a plan B, that there's actual strategy going into this team. And while I've championed him for his duration as coach, and it's been easy to say injuries have hampered the list this year, which they have, but next year he needs to improve. Otherwise we need to start looking for another coach, and there's still plenty of available senior coaches on the table that I think would happily take a young developing list. For St Kilda, we learnt that again their best is competitive, but I argue and I digress. They beat up against a young Richmond team that was very uncompetitive, and umpiring adjudication was non-existent for one team. So they're not going to get an easy look like this every week. So are they flat track bullying the younger, inexperienced teams and then underperforming against the teams that they should be beating? It's still a very unknown quantity for St Kilda. They went out of this game with all hopes of potentially having to defeat Gold Coast this coming weekend to play in Wildcard. But unfortunately, due to outcomes that happened in this particular round, St Kilda will not be featuring in the Wildcard round this year. So St Kilda's year after this upcoming game is done and dusted, which I feel is a little bit egg on the face because they recruited some players and threw some heavy contracts around, and it has fallen short of the mark. So they're going to need to rebound in a big way in 2027 with the talent they've picked up, because if they don't, I think those eggs on face become scrambled, and it's, yeah. They got to do better for the talent they've got. The next game was at Marvel Stadium, North Melbourne taking on Geelong, with a first quarter performance that honestly would have shocked and rocked the AFL world. I was absolutely floored to see the number that North Melbourne was doing on Geelong by quarter time. But the scoreline after that, even though a little bit of arm wrestling late in the third and going into the final quarter was had by North Melbourne, it was all Geelong after that. Geelong just, it was just a slow start, and to think in the end, after trailing by almost 40 points at quarter time, Geelong walk away as 15-point winners, just shows and embodies what I've been saying about Geelong all year. Come the pointy end of the season, come finals, this team just finds ways to win, and they're doing this with some key components still missing from this team. No Jeremy Cameron, no Max Holmes, some very influential players that are out of form. This makes it scary for the competition come September, because Geelong are just one of those teams that just get to the big dance, that gets to the occasion, and they just sometimes, I mean, we've seen them blown out of the water in last year's grand final, you know, but just absolutely one of those teams that you can never write off. And a lot of people would have thought dead in the water at quarter time, but some realists probably would have thought, just watch Geelong creep back into this, and that's exactly what they did. As I said, quarter time, 7-2-44, led one straight 6. By halftime, the lead had been taken. 10-4-64, Geelong led 9-3-57. They went on a 9-goal-4 half. North Melbourne only managing 2 goals, 1. At three-quarter time, 13-10-88 from Geelong, trailed 14-5-89, but the final score saw Geelong 19-11-125 defeat North Melbourne 17-8-110. And this game wasn't without injury. Harry Sheezel has a fractured cheekbone. He is done for the year. We had Wiltshire from Geelong go down with an injury, as well as a hamstring. Who was the hamstring by? I'm going to have to look this up. There was a hamstring injury late in the game. It was Warple, which as much as I hate to say it, Worpel, I feel, in the midfield kind of crunch for Geelong is easily replaceable, but it's always terrible to see a player go down with injury. James Worpel was one of those players from Hawthorn that was kind of a whipping boy for many and went to Geelong for better opportunity, coming into a team where he could potentially feature in finals, and he just might not get there now. He might not, depending on the severity of the hamstring injury, his year could be done. It was a game of opposing styles. Kangaroos scored 9 goals, 5 from stoppage, which I feel up against Geelong's midfield is very, very admirable. And I think we need to give credit where it's due for North Melbourne. Their midfield game this year has been great. I feel Jai Simpkin has been sensational this year. LDU's gone to a new level. And from intercept chains, Geelong outscored 14 goals, 8 to 8-3. So it was a game where at the stoppage, North Melbourne was clearly better, but then around the ground, the intercept game from Geelong was too hard to surmount, led by none other than Tom Stewart, who was very pivotal late in the game as well. When the game was still to be won, he was just swallowing everything that came his way, and we expect nothing from a champion like Stewart. The Kangaroos recorded 50 to 37 clearances in this game, but for intercept possessions, Geelong led at 62 to 50, so that just gives you the gaps on the scoring chains of which they were able to score from. Looking at the team stats, it was North Melbourne that led to the disposal count, 360 to 344. However, Geelong had 20 more inside 50s, 65 to 45, and only managed the 15 points. So North Melbourne using the ball better, getting better, potency from ball in hand, especially when going inside 50. They ran at 55%, which is up on their seasonal average. And surprisingly, even though Geelong only went at 52%, that too was still up on their inside 50 efficiency this year, which is only at an average of 50.2. That surprises me, because I feel when you put the two forward lines side by side, I feel Geelong's forward line is a hell of a lot more potent than what North Melbourne's is, but obviously I was rudely mistaken. While the free kick count in this game drew at 22 apiece, I feel North Melbourne were heavily adjudicated against again in a game where a lot of holding the ball calls and throwing the ball out of the contest were not called, and that seems to be a growing trend this year. There seems to be many instances where each and every round, and I reckon we go back to the start of the year, round 0, we can probably identify one game minimum every round where holding the ball is paid 2 different ways in the very same game. One team gets everything, the other team gets nothing. Feel free to sit at home and think that I'm just some fucking whack job that wants to bitch about umpiring all the time. But even though I have never come out and said umpiring has cost games of football, I just think, and you need to kind of try to see it from my perspective to probably understand where I'm coming from, adjudication can wrestle momentum straight out of a team's hands. And without momentum, how are they going to get back into the game? I think there were pivotal moments here where Geelong players were caught holding the ball, dropping the ball, throwing the ball out, that weren't called, that could have shifted the momentum of the game a little bit. Whether or not North Melbourne capitalise and score remains to be seen and determined. But I just think a lot of North Melbourne supporters were very unhappy with some calls in this game. Looking at the stoppage game, 45 hitouts to 40 the way of North Melbourne, 50 to 37 clearances, 21 to 11 at centre clearance, 29 to 26 at stoppage clearance. And now, Tristan Cherry was huge in this game. And yet you look at SEN's team of the week and they've named Mark Blixavs as the ruck of the week. He wasn't even the best ruck in this game, let alone the course of the weekend. So again, I would love to know the stat lines these guys are using to choose these teams of the weeks and give out votes, because while some people might disagree with myself and my objective calls, I think if you're in the limelight as, something tied to the AFL, you'd need to have some specific reasoning as to vote for people, and I just think they get it wrong sometimes. I don't know. Let's argue about it down in the comments below. Around the ground, 86 marks to 55. That was down by over half of the average for North Melbourne for the year. That's a huge gap. Defensively, both teams laid over 70 tackles, which is well up on their seasonal averages. But from the 74 tackles Geelong laid, 18 were inside 50. And that's where those intercept chains come into the equation. And that's where Geelong score a bulk of their score, which leads to a 15-point win, keeping those top 4 chances well and truly alive for them, considering they're about to run into Richmond this week and probably absolutely railroad us at GMHBA Stadium. For the votes, I mentioned him already. I gave Tristan Xerri 1 vote, 17 disposals, 13 contested, 1 mark, 11 tackles, 28 hitouts, 11 clearances, 103 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 2 score involvements. I gave 2 votes to Bailey Smith, 34 disposals, 10 contested, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 2 clearances, 601 metres gained and 8 score involvements, but I thought best on ground was Ollie Dempsey. While my All-Australian team probably 2 months ago had Bailey Smith and Max Holmes as my wingmen, if we're looking at pure wingmen to select for wing roles, Ollie Dempsey would have to be in conversation for All-Australian this year, because what he does in that role is some of the biggest impact from a wingman that we have seen over the course of the year. 24 disposals, 8 contested, 9 marks, 2 tackles, 2 clearances, 557 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 10 score involvements. He is either kicking goals or he's setting them up. And he's a great mark. We know he can take them overhead, he can take them on the chest, he's clean with disposal, and this was one of his best outings, even though, you know, other players might have had 10 more disposals than he did. I think he got a lot of quantity from the quantity he had. What did we learn? We learnt that North Melbourne aren't far off the pace. I honestly think next year, wildcard contention is well and truly open for them, and they should take that step into that role. For Geelong, we've already touched on it. You can never write them off. They were staring down the barrel of a 10-goal loss at quarter time, and yet they managed to wrestle it back, and all the momentum stuck their way. And then once they had the lead, their systems come into place again. They lock down those intercept marks. They shift the ball the way they want to. They can never be out of a premiership conversation. Ever. And just when you think players are moving on and they don't have somebody to step up, some unknown quantity steps up from their VFL and just announces themselves on the scene, like Polkinghorne has in Jeremy Cameron's absence. It's absolutely bewildering, but hey, Geelong doing Geelong things. They pick up the win. They're firming strong for finals. Can they get deep in the finals this year? I think there might be a little bit too much contention around them, but a prelim definitely is not off the cards at all. We then go up north to the Gabba with another Q clash going down. Brisbane hosting the little brother Gold Coast. And we know the Gold Coast might have picked up a win and broke that 10-game losing streak last week or the week prior against GWS. But this game was going to see them run into an absolute brick wall. If anybody thought Brisbane were going to drop this game, I think they were truly kidding themselves. Brisbane are getting into a rich vein of form. A vein of form that they didn't have at the start of the year, and people were questioning whether a three-peat was off the table. And just like Geelong, Brisbane are one team you can never truly write off, and it's just amazing to see how many people quickly jump off ship when teams are underperforming. But this list just keeps going from strength to strength. And this year, it hasn't been just needing the senior players to stand tall. The younger kids, the next generation of talent, have been getting them over the line each and every week. Brisbane are one of my favourite teams to watch outside of watching my own team. And I watch every single game, every single weekend. So I am always finding myself absolutely enraptured by how they play, when they play well. Because obviously a few weeks back when they got dismantled against Carlton, that wasn't a good watch for anybody that was in Brisbane's corner. But when they get their rebound work going, when you see the talents of the Ashcroft brothers, you see Wilmot running out of defensive 50, you see the small forwards like Kai Lohman, Zach Bailey, and the middle-sized ones like Cam Rayner all linking up, Logan Morris popping off at full forward. It's just an exciting core young list to look at and watch, and then obviously the senior talent just solidifies around that fact. This is what is going to hold this club in good stead for many, many years to come. Because while those older talents are going to get older and they'll eventually move away from the game, whether it be through trade or retirement, they are still going to have these young kids that are then going to be hitting their prime, hitting their straps. To think that the Ashcrofts, the Logan Morris, these players haven't hit their prime yet, makes this team so much more scarier on paper. It is absolutely unreal. But this was Brisbane by the tune of 42 points in a game that at quarter time was dead even. 2-3-15 apiece. At halftime, there was a 12-point lead to Brisbane. 5-7-37 to 3-7-25. But then even at that point in time, the game could be won. And I thought to myself, gee, Gold Coast, they've come out, they've come here to play today. But after that, very much so like we've seen many other times this year, the trajectory of Brisbane just went on a steady incline. 10-10-70 led 5-11-41 at three-quarter time, and the final score, 14-11-95, defeated 6-17-53. 17 behinds. After half-time, Gold Coast kicked 3 goals, 10. And Brisbane went on to kick 9 goals, 4. Inaccuracy absolutely shot Gold Coast in the arse. 12 goals to 4 after quarter time was absolutely... It's just so emphatic to watch from Brisbane. And Brisbane can have a slow start, but they're one of those teams that finish quickly and finish hard. And they'll keep mounting that pressure on. They're not a team that rest on their laurels and take their foot off the gas. They'll keep going and going and going, and that is very reflective of how this second half at least played out as well. This is their Gold Coast 5th match of the season that they have lost, where they have won the inside 50 count. 5 games they've lost where they've had more inside 50s, and defensively, they conceded 57 points from defensive half, which is their second most for the year. And again, just coughing it up and allowing Brisbane to get their own systems in place and get the drive coming off of halfback through the likes of Dane Zorko, through Wilmot, running it through the midfield with the Ashcroft brothers, with Lachie Neale, who Lachie Neale got tagged in this game and just allowed Will Ashcroft to do his own thing. Now, Neale has a lot of respect on his name, do not get me wrong, but ideally maybe not the player you want to be tagging, because I think when it comes to things like scoreboard pressure and things of that nature, there are many other players on this Brisbane team that should be getting attention paid to them first. And there's many other things that are going to be undoing for the Gold Coast here. Obviously, they went out of their way to recruit Christian Petrarca. 3 first-round picks, I think they ended up coughing up for him. An inside mid, through and through. He does have Dustin Martin-like qualities in the way that he can be an offensive threat in a one-on-one position inside forward 50 as well. But to bring in an inside midfielder to a midfield that is already stacked, and then as a coach, Damien Hardwick's sitting there now saying, oh, he's lacking confidence, he needs to find some form, and I need to learn where to play him. You've drafted him into your team, you've traded him into your team as an inside midfielder. Why isn't he getting inside midfield time? You can play someone like a Tuke Miller off of the wing, or off of half back, or off of half forward. I'd rather see Petrarca in the midfield over some of the other players like Bailey Humphrey getting midfield minutes. I'd rather see Petrarca running through there. Humphrey's more of an offensive threat inside forward 50 in my eyes. A huge signing for them actually this week was the fact that Bailey Humphrey only 12 months ago was looking to get out of the Gold Coast, and has not only committed to staying there for the duration of his contract, but has added 2 years to it. So he is now tied to the club until 2030. But I think that kind of understates some of the problems that are going on, because we know over recent weeks it's been revealed that players are unhappy with the coach. They're unhappy with some things that are going on behind the scenes. It's been alluded at that I think Christian Petrarca is unhappy with the culture that he's walked into, and he didn't think it was what he was promised. There's talk about potential players leaving, like with the whole Zach Butters trade scenario. Some clubs and some supporters are saying, oh, if we can't get Butters, Matt Rowell's gettable. I have it on good authority, won't reveal sources, but Noah Anderson has been a name linked to potential Richmond talks. I don't know whether that is if Zach Butters falls through for Richmond, or whether they're wanting to get Butters and Anderson. It'd be a huge haul if we did, but that's the thing here. When names like Rowell and Anderson are now starting to become involved in trade talk, when we know Ben King is probably on the way out, This could see the unravelling of a club that walking into this year had such a potent list that promised a lot and could now see a bit of an exodus go down. And I don't know whether that's through coach, that's through players, that's through culture, but there's a lot going on at the Gold Coast that I think might see a little bit of unravelling go down in the off-season. Sam Collins, rib injury in this game. Again, not sure of the severity, but if it's bad enough, I wouldn't be playing him next week. Last game of the round, taking on St Kilda, give him a bit of a rest. Breaking down the team statistics for this game, it was Brisbane in the way of disposal, 354 to 338. Their biggest gap was on their kicking game, which they led by 44. They actually lost the handball game by 28, sorry. But again, inside 50s, 52 to 45. The way of the Gold Coast. They had 7 more inside 50s and they lost this game by 42 points because their inside 50 efficiency ran at 51%, while Brisbane ran at 82% when their seasonal average is 56. They were on an absolute rip in this game. In the stoppage, Gold Coast won 42 hitouts to 31. 35 clearances to 30. Their biggest gap was at centre clearance where they won 15 to 6. They were getting first hand on the ball through the midfield, which you obviously know they're tagging Lachie Neale, so you get a contested ball winner out of that retrospect, but you've still got Real, Anderson, Petrarca, Miller. These players, great ball users, great ball winners, but their issue that they have had this year is they've got so many star players, but they haven't been firing on all cylinders all the time. And we will talk about that momentarily because this was a game yet again where Petrarca's influence was nil, was next to nothing. They had 12 more tackles around the contest. They took 21 more marks. Brisbane were just better, effortlessly. And being able to generate they've kicked 95 points total, and they have scored 57 of those 95 off of defensive chains and turnover is a huge statistic. Now, we talk about these players that I've mentioned, Miller, Anderson, Rao, Petrarca. Best on for the Gold Coast was probably Ned Moyle. Next best after that was Bodie Hewland. Then you've got Noah Anderson and Matt Rao, which you'd always expect those two to be up in conversation. Then you've got to go a fair way down the ranking list in this game to find Tuke Miller, who was pretty much ineffective in this game. And then you've got to go all the way down to find Christian Petrarca, who 12 disposals, 1 behind, 2 clearances. Man, the fall off is real. Considering after 5 rounds, he'd be close to leading the Brownlow. He started the year off in sensational form, and a lot of people were thinking, oh, he needed this move. It's going to revitalise his career. And then ever since he did that hamstring, he came back with solid form, but then as time's gone on, he's seeing less midfield minutes. He's being put into the forward 50 more often than not, just one-on-one without getting that midfield exposure. We've seen instances with him getting stuck into players who are taking the ball from him in certain plays. It's a toxic breeding ground, I feel, behind the scenes at the Gold Coast, and we're going to see some fallout. For the votes for this game, I did land on Dane Zorko for the 1 vote. I thought his drive off half-back was huge. 25 disposals, 2 contested, 4 marks, 6 tackles, 1 clearance, 578 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 5 score involvements. 2 votes goes to Levi Ashcroft. 26 disposals, 6 contested, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 1 clearance, 225 metres gained, 1 goal assist, and 4 score involvements. And best on, in my eyes, was Will Ashcroft. 31 disposals, 9 contested, 8 marks, 2 tackles, 4 clearances, 487 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 7 score involvements. What did we learn? We've already spoken about Brisbane. You can't write them off. This young list of kids that are coming through are going to hold Brisbane in great stead for many years to come. The only thing that could hamper that is if Tasmania come along and start throwing some money around to try to drag those young kids down to Tassie. But I don't see that happening if Brisbane can build a dynasty. This is a list, and I'm not being facetious here by saying so. They could 4-peat. They could 5-peat. They've got the talent to do so. They might lose Lachie Neale at the end of this year through trade, but the players that they still have readily available, fit and firing, ready to go, still make Brisbane one of the best teams in the competition. For the Gold Coast, I think we need to get bearing on what's going to happen to them in this off-season to truly know how this team moves forward. We know Jamara Ugle-Hagan pretty much done with AFL at this point in time. That was a failed experiment. If Ben King leaves, that's not leaving much potency in that forward line at key forward position. And then you've got players like Petrarca, who's apparently disgruntled. Rowell and Anderson could be gettable. Crazy to think. This could be one of the all-time implosions. And to see it happening to Damien Hardwick, makes me happy deep down. We'll just say that. The next game is a statistical anomaly. And just the way it played out in the end is so creepy and eerie, and just it had me and many just in absolute bewilderment, because earlier this year Hawthorn and Collingwood drew for the first time in their history, 93 apiece, with Dylan Moore having the final kick to decide the outcome of that game. This game finishes in a draw, 92 apiece, 1 point off of what each team got at the earlier point of the season, with Dylan Moore taking the final kick to determine the outcome. To pick the draw, maybe, but to pick the exact same player to have the final kick to determine the game? Huge! Those odds are astronomical, and it was a game that saw Dylan Moore take that final shot to win it. All he needed to do was score. And young Sam Swadling, only having played a handful of games in his AFL career, gets a spoil on the line to keep the ball in play and get the draw. And to see everybody get around Swadling like they did was absolutely huge. They took this as a win. This was a game where they should have been absolutely ran all over the top of. They had many players from their best 22 missing, especially defensively. And Hawthorn should have chopped them up, but they let so many opportunities go begging Hawthorn. Some very easy decision-making errors that cost them a very winnable game. At quarter time, it was dead even, 2-3-15 apiece. Collingwood found a lot of ascendancy going into the second term break, leading 7-5-47 to 3-7-25. Hawthorn wrestled back momentum in the third, leading 8-12-60 to 8-9-57, and after taking a large lead in the final term, it was Collingwood who put a bit of a gap on, and then obviously the even break at the end of the game, which saw both teams finish tied 13-14, 92 apiece. Huge. Just wild, and there were many moments for both teams that went begging. Many moments that could have seen both teams hit the scoreboard in a bigger way. Missed opportunities, turnovers, I think the pressure of the game truly got to both teams in many aspects. So a draw here, breaking even keel over the season, 2 head-to-head battles, 2 draws. Dylan Moore having deciding factor in both. Just so good. Such cinema, I feel. And it was great to see a young Collingwood list that had their backs up against it truly rise to the occasion in this game. They did lead the disposals, Collingwood, 384 to 359. Their biggest gap was in handballs, which they had 51 more. 60 inside 50s to 47. Collingwood had plenty of looks inside 50, but a 53% efficiency inside cost them severely. In the ruck, Hawthorn were infinitely better, 48 to 30 hitouts, but around the ground, the stoppage game was won by Collingwood, 41 to 29 clearances, with the biggest gap being at stoppage, 30 to 17. Uncontested possession was only marginally won by Collingwood, same as contested, but they turned the ball over 9 more times than Hawthorn did. So a little bit of skill error from Collingwood costing opportunity as well. 99 marks taken to 70 the way of Hawthorn. So they were finding plenty of the ball and being able to maintain momentum in their hands, especially 16 marks inside 50. 16 marks inside 50 to 10. And they still had opportunities go begging. I think as much as Collingwood are lauding themselves here and like their pressure around the contest was huge, 92 tackles to 55. The 20 tackles inside 50 to 3. There are some stat lines that suggest Hawthorn were better, but there are many others that suggest Collingwood were better. And I think Collingwood, while they walk away as big winners in this game, Hawthorn will be kicking themselves, because while Collingwood might have had more inside 50s, to have 6 more inside 50 marks and not capitalise on that, to allow, what is that, a gap of what, 40 more tackles pretty much, to allow that many stoppage clearances to go awry. Hawthorn should have been way better equipped for this game than what they were. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh here, but when defensively Collingwood were absolutely shot, no Perryman, no Howe, no Darcy Moore, no Braden Maynard, there is 4 of your starting back 6 in their best 23. Hawthorn come into this game as potent and fit as they have been in months and still couldn't capitalise. This is why I question Hawthorn's legitimacy to going for a flag this year. People want to write Collingwood off. I think we can write Hawthorn off in the same vein. I think there are many better teams in the finals conversation than Hawthorn. Hawthorn might be playing better football currently than Adelaide, but I would have Adelaide suited better just purely off their pressure game than I have Hawthorn placed. And again, am I being a little bit harsh? Maybe so. When it came to the votes for this game, however, I bounced around a few. And I'm very tempted at this point in time to maybe change again, because I just feel his game should warrant a vote, even though there's a player here that I have voted for that led score involvements on the ground. But I think when you have a look at the ratings of some players, given the fact there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players that are highly rated more than him, am I being a little bit harsh here? Are we going on the fly? If I'm going on the fly, let's see how many score involvements this kid had. I'm going on the fly. We are making a strategic change. I originally did have Dylan Moore for 1 vote. 13 score involvements from 19 disposals, I thought was impactful. But I'm going to give 1 vote to Sam Swadling here. He has only played a handful of games. He comes out of this game having 29 touches, 7 marks, 1 tackle, 2 clearances, 660 metres gained, 6 score involvements. How many contested possessions did he have? He had 7 contested, and he obviously had the match-winning spoil on the goal line, which for a kid that has only played a handful of games, that is a lot of composure to be shown. And I'm happy to swap the votes up there to get him onto the board. The 2 votes I gave to Nick Dacos. 36 disposals, 6 contested, 3 marks, 3 tackles, 2 clearances, 542 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 9 score involvements. I'm giving best on ground to Beau McCreery, because I thought his pressure around the contest was insurmountable. 22 disposals, 10 contested, 3 marks, 12 tackles, 3 clearances, 520 metres gained, 1 goal, 2 goal assists, 10 score involvements. I feel the thing that we have learnt from this game is that at least this year, could we definitively say Collingwood are closer to a flag than Hawthorn? Is that me overthinking and being stupid and making big calls? Because we've been questioning Collingwood's list for the better part of 2 years. And you know, they're haphazard up forward because they don't have legitimate key forwards. Yet Dan McStay, I think, is having a huge year. Defensively, they were absolutely shot. But we have a look in this game, and there are so many young kids that stood tall. I mean, I don't know Beau McCreery's age, but he was best on in my eyes. Rowan Steele had a big game. Sam Swadling had a big game. Ed Allen was huge. Harvey Harrison was very serviceable. Ned Long was good. Angus Anderson was good. Charlie West played his role. Noah Howe's even played his role. Puncher was the lowest rated player on the field, yet Puncher had some big moments for the little impact he had. Statistically anyway. So we know how good Hawthorn are, and Hawthorn probably get infinitely better. If they can land Ben King, then they've got a incredibly potent forward half, and that does make their team infinitely greater. I still think they have one of the best defenses in the competition, if not the best defense. And they got picked apart by a forward line that has been touted as being haphazard and terrible. They got opened up in a midfield that Nick Dacos wasn't even best on ground. And normally Nick Dacos has to carry that midfield. Bo McCreary steps up and says, hey, hold my beer, I'll have a crack this week. Defensive efforts from Puncher, from Swadling, from Frampton. I just think collectively Collingwood were the better team. Probably should have walked away with the 4 points instead of 2, and I think that's why they're happy to take the 2. But I don't know whether this leaves Hawthorn. If Collingwood have made Wildcard, I think out of all the Wildcard teams, Collingwood can do the most damage. Just my take. Hawthorn will finish inside top 4, probably, and could go out in back-to-back weeks, back-to-back sets. Boy, wouldn't that be something to see. The next game and final game of Saturday, unfortunately, is one that we're going to be able to skim over quite quickly. It's the second week running where Port Adelaide have been absolutely blown out of the water. 2 weeks ago, it was to the tune of almost 100 points against Sydney, and in this particular outing at home against Melbourne, it was the Demons by 76 points. Not good. Not a good look for Port Adelaide, not the way they want to finish a year. They've had weeks where they've been competitive without the likes of Rosie and Butters through the mix, but it just sometimes it's a little bit hard for them to kind of rise to the occasion, and this is just, they're running up against a team that has been defying the odds this year. Was expected to be a bottom 4, bottom 5 team, to drop off the face of the earth because of the players they lost, but Stephen King has revitalised this club. Melbourne have got so much youth and energy about them now, even within players that are older and defying time and just playing incredibly well for the age that they're at. It was just incredibly one-sided, and the tone was set at quarter time. Melbourne led 7-2-44 to 1-2-8. At halftime, 9-3-57 led 3-2-20. At three-quarter time, 15-5-95 led 6-6-42. And the final score, 20-12-132, defeated 8-8-56. Melbourne scored 111 points from intercept chains. The most by any club from this source this year, which is obvious given the fact that it's 111 fucking points. 111 points scored from 132 off of intercept and turnover is absolutely incredible. 84 to 56 intercept possessions, including 54 to 44 from defensive half. And from defensive half, they scored 70 points to Port Adelaide's 15. And while Port Adelaide won the clearance count 44 to 30, including 20 to 10 at the centre clearance, they only scored 3 goals from that chain. To get all that dominance from the midfield and get nothing on return from the scoreboard, I mean, they're getting all that winning around the ground, and then they're turning it straight over to Melbourne, and Melbourne's counterpunch is just way too hard to stop, and they did that against Fremantle all day, every day. They weren't resting on their laurels. They were quick to move the ball. They've got pace behind it. Just absolutely opened them up around the contest. It was very big. It was huge. There were some injuries, probably none bigger than Alia being concussed defensively. That's going to hurt Port Adelaide, because obviously he doesn't play this coming game. So their best defender gone, especially one that prides himself on defensive interceptability and pressure. Jacob Van Rooyen has copped 3-week suspension for the hit that concussed him, and Alia was knocked the fuck out before he hit the ground. Now, Van Rooyen starts looking at the ball. This is my take. Feel free to disagree. Ball's coming into forward 50. He does look at the ball. He then takes his eyes off the ball and he looks at Alia. I think that's the first damning stage. He then, I don't know whether he's trying to swat the ball, but he ends up clotheslining Alia with his forearm direct to the head, and Alia is knocked out before he even hits the ground because he ragdolls and fucking body bags as he hits the deck. 3 weeks was the sanction. They tried to overturn it at the MRO. MRO have stood firm, saying 3 weeks. I think it's still ridiculous that 3 weeks has been the magic number. There have been some instances this year that deserved more and have deserved less, but 3 seems to be where they want to roll the dice this particular season. And obviously that's going to hurt moving forward in this game in particular, because you take out their best defender and Melbourne were just able to score infinitely easier after Alira went off the ground. Breaking down the team statistics, was it as dominant as the scoreboard suggests? Because sometimes it's not. Sometimes there's a blowout on the scoreboard, but the stats display otherwise. However, for this particular game, where does it fall? It does fall on the wayside of blowout. 404 disposals to Melbourne ahead of 338. Both teams had over 200 kicks, but I mean 188 handballs to 124 was where the gap was put. 62 inside 50s to 49. So Port Adelaide had 49 inside 50s and had 16 scores. Melbourne had 62 inside 50s and they scored 32 times. 58% efficiency inside 50 against 36 for Port Adelaide. Now, this was a game that was heavily skewed in free kick count, 24-12. And I feel there were some instances again where Port Adelaide were having calls against them that weren't being paid for them. And that was a growing trend I saw with Melbourne versus Fremantle as well. Melbourne were getting out of jail free with many holding the ball decisions not paid against them. And the same kind of outcome happened in this game, unfortunately, which, again, just takes the sting out of the game a bit, especially against teams that are getting beaten up on. Just feels like it's a one-sided, like a fight where one arm is tied behind their back permanently. That's what it just feels like as a neutral or as a supporter that's invested in the game. When it comes to stoppage, it was Port Adelaide who had the better of Melbourne. 32-25 hitouts, 44-30 clearances. But then everything else just opens up to Melbourne. More contested possession, more uncontested possession, 30 less turnovers. They had 30 less marks, Melbourne, but they marked at the same amount inside 50. Had just shy of the same amount of contested marks. And for all the extra disposal they had, they laid 20 more tackles, 15 of which were laid inside 50. They just mounted the pressure. They were willing to come to the game. They knew what was on the line. Melbourne want to finish in that realm of top 6 where they're guaranteed a finals spot. And with the run they've had this year at the MCG, they've only dropped 1 game at the MCG this year. They're one of those teams that aren't getting enough respect put on their name, I feel, for premiership contention. I definitely feel a premiership is achievable with this list. And with how they've played the G this year, you can't write them off. You'd be stupid to even consider writing them off. For the votes this game, I tossed and turned with a few. I landed on Bailey Fritsch for 1. 15 disposals, 7 contested, 4 marks, 293 metres gained, 4 goals, 2 goal assists and 11 score involvements. The 2 vote I gave to Max Gawn. 25 disposals, 15 contested, 4 marks, 4 tackles, 22 hitouts, 9 clearances, 282 metres gained and 5 score involvements. Best on ground for me was Cade Chandler. 18 disposals, 6 contested, 4 marks, 9 tackles, 292 metres gained, 4 goals, 2 goal assists, 8 score involvements. I think we learnt what we learnt about Melbourne quite substantially. They're up to the task, they're up to the challenge, they know what they need to do to bring silverware home this year, but maybe inexperience is something that is on the negative side heading into it. Maybe not much exposure to this style of football and this stage will squash them a little bit. Remains to be seen if that will be the case. For Port Adelaide, I've been saying that there's light at the end of the tunnel. Like if they lose Zach Butters, they showed Connor Rozee walking around during this game on the sidelines, and he's still moving around really gingerly and really bad. Maybe the nerve damage he's received in his leg is a lot worse than what we're being led on to believe. I don't know whether the light now shines as brightly at Port Adelaide. Do we potentially see in a couple of years' time Jason Horne-Francis put his hand up and say, I'll go play with Ken down at Tasmania? Like Port Adelaide could be one of those teams that had all these stars that are now going to go outwards. I don't know. Another club that I think we need to keep a close eye on during the off-season. The first of 3 on Sunday was at NG Stadium, GWS hosting West Coast, in a game which ended up being a 54-point whitewash. And I was actually quite taken aback by the outcome of this game, because we know earlier this year West Coast absolutely dominated GWS, and this was a game that I honestly thought West Coast would be up to their necks in, because even though they have lost recent games, they have showed competitiveness. They have showed, capabilities to win stoppage, to get the ball inside 50, and to generate decent score. But GWS absolutely picked them apart. If they were vultures, the bones of West Coast were picked absolutely clean in a game where the first quarter presented so much promise, and then GWS just ran away with it, and there was no stopping them. Once they started going, no momentum shift went down. At quarter time, GWS led 5-2-32 to 5-1-31. At halftime, 11-4-70 led 5-6-36. At three-quarter time, 13-9-87 led 5-10-40. And the final score, 16-15-111, led 7-15-57. This was very strange, because West Coast, when it came to winning first possession at stoppage, they did so 10 more times than the GWS midfield. But they only won 3 more clearances total for the game, and they were outscored by 40 points from stoppage, which is very unlike West Coast, because West Coast, despite their ladder positioning right now, have been one of the better performing stoppage teams in the competition this year. Just from defensive half, GWS scored 69 points, including 36 from defensive half intercepts. That seems to be the tail of the tape this particular round. Teams were just defensively, generating score from back half and intercept way too easily. And I think that's just a little bit of haphazard movement with ball in hand, just banging it forward and hoping your keys can bring it down either in a mark or bring it down to ground for the crumbing forwards to roll through. But GWS have that back six that prides themselves on picking off intercepts and driving the ball through run and carry, that every time West Coast tried to launch that forward 50 movement, Whitfield, Ash, Connor Iden, they were all just chopping the ball off at the pass way too easily and way too confidently in a game that inside the center, Toby Bedford was a late out, and I honestly thought, okay, well, if Toby Bedford is out, that gives West Coast more of a chance, because you'd think Bedford goes to Harley Reid, nullifies any movement outside of that midfield, and completely shuts them down. But then to have a look at the statistical breakdown of this game and to see that West Coast were competitive in some facets, but still just, it was the intercept and the defensive work of GWS that absolutely dismantled West Coast's game, just kind of leaves a little bit of sour taste in the mouth of West Coast supporters, because they were up to the task. In the stoppage, they were the better team all day, but collectively around the ground, GWS led disposal 379 to 321. Inside 50s, both teams had 53. Obviously the breakdown here is the fact that West Coast only ran at 41% inside 50. GWS led at 60% inside 50. West Coast led hitouts 44 to 41. They led clearance 38 to 35. The biggest gap being of 5 in the centre clearance, 13 to 8. But then contested possession all the way of GWS. Uncontested possession 60 more the way of GWS. Marks around the ground 111 to 82, and most of that 111 was defensive intercept and being able to rebound from that fact. 19 marks inside 50, 10 contested. 5 more tackles, 60 to 55. So West Coast kept bringing the pressure. They won the stoppage. They win, I'd say they win the pressure game because they only laid 5 less tackles collectively. They just couldn't get it done. And while some games they've trailed some numbers and they've been able to be a little bit more reputable on the scoreboard, this is a team that they ran up against that unfortunately GWS were able to capitalize on their ball movement going forward, and just cutting off access to a team's scores is one thing. Being able to shut down any defensive effort and being able to intercept as easily as GWS were doing is great. But then the counterpunch is the fact that GWS have a team that can put you to the sword through that interceptability, and West Coast weren't ready for it. And there were some parts in this game that opened up through that uncontested play where they were just chipping the ball around by foot, they were getting easy handballs, and they made West Coast look as stupid as West Coast made them look earlier this season. So it was a bit of a vengeful fight back, I feel, from GWS. I feel they came into this game with a chip on their shoulder. They rocked up to get the job done, and winning this game kept their finals hopes alive, at least statistically, to potentially appear in that wildcard round. But as you're about to witness when we get into the next game, it is not meant to be, unfortunately. They do miss out. For the votes, I did land on 1 vote for Toby Green. 16 disposals, 4 contested, 8 marks, 5 tackles, 503 metres gained, 2 goals, 1 goal assist and 7 score involvements. I was wrestling between him and Connor Iden. I really wanted to get Connor Iden in there. And I'm going to go out on a very big limb and say if Connor Iden doesn't, at bare minimum this year, make the 40-plus man squad that gets narrowed down for All-Australian before the squad is selected, that he has been absolutely robbed, because he has had a huge year defensively and an incredibly underrated one too, because nobody seems to be talking about him. The 2 I gave 2 and 3 to, however, have actively been in conversation about GWS all year this year. 2 votes goes to Lockie Whitfield. 33 disposals, 5 contested, 9 marks, 1 clearance, 631 metres gained and 9 score involvements. But best on ground goes to Lockie Ash. 36 disposals, 7 contested, 11 marks, 867 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 11 score involvements. What did we learn? We learnt that GWS still possess, at the peak of their powers, one of the best lists in the competition, but all these injuries that they have suffered over recent years have meant that we have never seen them at full tilt. We haven't seen Tom Green have a real good crack at it for over 12 months. Josh Kelly in and out with injury. Does Jesse Hogan leave at the end of the year? Does Jake Stringer leave at the end of the year? If those 2 go, Aaron Cadman is your number 1 man. Is he ready to be? Is the question. And on the flip side, with West Coast, where does their big improvement come to push them to the next echelon? I'm not being stupid, I think, by saying that in the next 2 to 3 years, West Coast will be wildcard contending. It's just how they go about recruitment in that period of time to truly bolster the list that they have. They're getting role players, they're getting serviceable players, but they need match winners, they need bona fide stars. Can they land the big fish? Let's see, because if they can, it'll boost this rebuild exponentially. Over a period of years where we thought they weren't going to make any improvement, they're finally getting there. And while they were blown off the park on the scoreboard in this game, statistically they're showing that they can still match it with the best. It's just no return for all that effort really hampers you as a young club, and I'm just hoping it doesn't demoralize this team, because they've got some great youth coming through their system. This next game had so many implications. The Western Bulldogs going into this game without Tim English, without Marcus Bontempelli. If they lose, they could potentially drop down in the wildcard kind of configuration and would throw some potential matchups out of whack a little bit here. Carlton coming into this game needing to win, doing so, or at least managing a draw, would make sure they locked up a wildcard spot. Lose this game, and the door is wide open for either St Kilda or GWS to pinch it, who do have, I think, leading into this game, better percentage. But it ended in a draw, and Carlton in the end played for it, which has brought a lot of conjecture about. Some people are suggesting they shouldn't be proud that they played for the draw, especially in a game where they played against a Bulldogs team without Marcus Bontempelli, without Tim English, arguably 2 of their most important players, and they were happy to concede 2 points to lock it up instead of going for a win. They were happy to just slow play down late, maintain possession, and let the whistle blow, let the siren go. And, you know, it's smart play because it guarantees you finals, but is that the kind of momentum you want to be taking into it, or do you want to be putting your foot down and running away with the game? That's where I start asking questions. Having a look at the match timeline, let's break it down. The Bulldogs had a sizable lead early, but Carlton managed to wrestle it back. Quarter time, 5-3-33, led 3-2-20. At halftime, it was the Dogs 7-4-46, leading 6-5-41. At 3-quarter time, it was Carlton, 10-7-67, leading 9-8-62. And the final scoreline saw 12-10, 82, tie with 12-10, 82. This, as I said, was good enough for Carlton to get this wildcard spot. Both clubs threw everything at this. Both teams looking to score late, but then, as I mentioned, Carlton knew what was up late in the game. They get a free kick paid against Ed Richards. I think he ran too far with the ball, and then Carlton were just happy to soak up time. And fair play. I mean, they get the message out, hey, let's just slow it up. 2 points is going to guarantee us a final spot, but I just feel in these kind of scenarios, you want to prove that you're the better team. You want to get another score. You want to be able, you can hold up play and you could accidentally turn it over and then you're on the back end of it. So I don't know. It's just, in my eyes, I would be coaching for the win instead of the draw. That's just me. That's my own hot take. But Carlton doing the unthinkable, thinking they started the year 1-8 from 9 games. And then they have managed to get wildcard contention here, where it looks like currently they're going to have to go to Adelaide to take on Adelaide, which has them, I think, one space behind the 8 ball already. And to think this was a draw with how big of a statistical gap some of these areas in this game have had. This is wild, right? Okay, so disposals. Carlton had 112 more, 456 to 344. They had 77 more kicks. They had 55 more handballs, and yet they had 10 less inside 50s, 48 to 58. 43% inside efficiency. Bulldogs running only 39% inside efficiency from those 58. Stoppage game. Carlton won convincingly the hit-out game, 37 to 22. Obviously, no Team English, going to get towed up. They won the clearances, 39 to 36. Carlton had more contested possession. Uncontested possession, they had 104 more uncontested. And they could not generate anything with it. They took 146 marks to 76. They had 70 more marks for the game. Both teams had 10 marks inside 50, and the Bulldogs had more contested marks. They had 100 more disposals, and they laid 7 more tackles, which isn't that big of a gap. But this is where you question quality over quantity. Like, Carlton's ball movement by foot is clean. But to have all this statistical dominance, to have 10 less inside 50s, to not get any looks inside 50 when you've had all this ball, what are you doing with it? You've got 70 more uncontested. What the fuck's been done with it? I don't know, man. This was, it was a great game of football. It come down to the wire. As a neutral supporter, you love seeing games like this play out. But for all the dominance Carlton had, the Bulldogs just, I feel, looked better in part. And this was without Bont. This was without English. This is without some other key players as well. Obviously, no Sam Darcy being one of the big ones as well. Carlton come into this game as full tilt, as we've seen them in a hot minute. Jacob Wiedering back in defence. A full complement with Smith, with Walsh, with Cripps. All the likes through the midfield with Hewitt. Mackay up forward. Kemp up forward. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about this one. Let me know how you feel down below. For the votes for this game, again, Sam Walsh was touted as one of the best on field. He was. I'm giving him one vote, but he was voted as best on for Carlton. I don't think he was. I'm giving him one vote here because I think there was someone who had more influence on the game. But I digress. 33 disposals for Sam Walsh, 8 contested, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 318 metres gained and 5 score involvements. I'm giving 2 votes to George Hewitt. 30 disposals, 9 contested, 12 marks, 8 tackles, 5 clearances, 111 metres gained, 1 goal assist, 5 score involvements. Best on was Ed Richards. This guy needed to lift in the absence of Marcus Bontempelli, and he turned around and said, boys, jump on my back, I will carry you to the promised land. 31 disposals, 13 were contested, 2 marks, 2 tackles, 6 clearances, 644 metres gained, 2 goals, 2 goal assists, 11 score involvements. Both teams are in wildcard configuration here. Currently, as it sits, I think it is looking like Carlton versus Adelaide, Bulldogs versus Collingwood. Bulldogs are set to potentially regain Marcus Bontempelli this coming week, but with wildcard the week after, maybe they pull a bit of a dodgy and say, oh, Marcus is still a bit sore, he needs another week off. Because coming into finals, a fully rested Marcus Bontempelli off 2 weeks break, huge. Fully fit, could be a difference maker, could be a match winner, and we know how good Bont is. But with Carlton, just the complacency here of being able to accept the draw and not want to push for the win, if not morally, for momentum, for confidence, for everything in between, because again, they had so much more ball. They won the contest so much easier, and yet they came up short in so many other facets. They're probably lucky that they drew this game in the end, given the fact that for all that extra ball they had, the Bulldogs were able to take it to them. And to do so without star quality players, I think Bulldogs walk away as the moral victory here. They both walk away with 2 points. They're both playing like wildcard finals, but I'd rather be in Bulldogs' boat than I would be Carlton right now. I don't know. Maybe my anti-Carlton agenda is too strong, but I just think, again, all that dominance for nothing. All that dominance for a draw, and to be complacent to just run the game out and hold the ball up and let the siren go. Not something that I personally like seeing. Final game of the round was at the MCG, Essendon hosting Sydney. It's only the second time this year Sydney have played at the MCG, and to Essendon's credit, this was only 36 points the way of Sydney. I was suggesting this would be close to a 100-point blowout given what Sydney did to Port Adelaide 2 weeks ago, but Essendon came to play, and even though the scoreboard blew out the way it did, for them to still stay in touch, for them to still score 11 goals, 10, I take my hats off to Essendon. This was a hard-fought contest. Quarter time, 9-1 led 3 goals straight. Half-time, 11-4 led 7-4. At three-quarter time, 13-9 led 9-7, and the final scoreline, 17-10-112, defeated 11-10-76. Was slow going. Was slow going for Sydney in some areas, but this was Bombers bringing a little bit of pressure to the contest. Some players rising to the occasion. While Sydney walk away with 36 points the victory, the Bombers had 15 more tackles for the game. They had a pressure factor that was 11 more than Sydney. They fought hard in this contest, and that's, as a neutral, as an Essendon supporter, this is what you love to see for a young rebuilding team that's been knocked pillar to post. Just effort. And they had it. They had it in this game. Despite the fact that Sydney controlled the stoppage, they scored 60 points from the source compared to only 8 from Essendon. Essendon still brought pressure around the contest. They still were able to bring physical pressure for perceived pressure. Zach Merritt ended up with a kind of cheekbone kind of eye injury as well. Could potentially see him out for the final game for Essendon, and could be the final time we see Zach Merritt in an Essendon jumper, given he was desperate to get out last year, and I actually do think he would desperately push for it this year as well, as unfortunate as that might be for some Bomber fans out there. The stat line isn't broken up that far apart at all. The score line suggests much bigger. Essendon only had 19 more disposals, 399 to 380, 54 to 50, inside 50s. They only had 4 more than Essendon. Essendon only lost the hitouts by 2, 31 to 33. They only lost clearance by 7, 33 to 40. They turned the ball over less. They marked the ball more, 96 to 73. They laid more tackles, 76 to 61. So again, statistically, they were up to their necks in it, Essendon, and that's where you've got to pay credit where credit's due. Sydney were able to put the score on because we know the potency of the players that they have, and when you look at the names of the players that scored, to no surprise, most of this damage was done in the opening term. Charlie Curnow kicks 3 in the first term, but only manages 1 goal for the rest of the game. Chad Warner kicks 3 goals, all in the first term. Heaney finishes with 3 goals. McDonald kicks 2. Jake Lloyd kicks 2. But it's your usual culprit standing tall for Sydney. For Essendon, when you look at the highest rated players on the field, Will Setterfield, again, I feel he's a whipping boy, but he was great. Vigo Vicente was great. Archie Roberts, solid season, great. Jackson Pryor was great. Zach Reed was solid. Dyson Sharp was great. Nick Bryan had a good game. Reece Unwin, apologies, played well. Jacob Farrow had a solid game. These young kids are standing tall when they need to stand tall. It was a very impressive watch for somebody as a neutral that comes from a standpoint of knowing what it is to struggle and watch your team suffer. Essendon played incredibly well in this game. For the votes, hard to look past the 3 I went for, and obviously we'll try to brush over this quickly because 2 of the 3 are included in the 5 that aren't playing for the rest of the year, so we won't talk about that again. But Chad Warner gets 1 vote from me, 23 disposals, 7 contested, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 5 clearances, 474 metres gained, 3 goals, 3 goal assists, 9 score involvements. 2 votes goes to Errol Goulden, 47 disposals, 12 contested, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 8 clearances, 1,034 metres gained and 9 score involvements. But I just feel from a personal standpoint in this game, Isaac Heaney was more influential with less ball in hand. 29 disposals, 18 contested, 9 marks, 7 tackles, 7 clearances, 557 metres gained, 3 goals, 2 goal assists, 11 score involvements. What have we learnt? Sydney aren't winning a premiership because 5 players that are most critical to their team are now sitting out. For Essendon, obviously shining light at the end of the tunnel. They're showing that they can lay pressure in games, that they can match statistically with the best, but their inability to hit the scoreboard has let them down. And maybe that's something they can address in the off-season, maybe it's not, but they've got a long list of players that haven't re-signed with the club yet, and some young kids that could be pivotal in this growth are still yet to be signed on and are being touted as being delisted. So with no senior coach still appointed for next year, with a caretaker coach still in line, with exit meetings to be had, with signings to be done, with trades and drafts to be done, Essendon leaving this a little bit too late. I feel they should have already appointed this senior coach so they can get the back end of the season stuff done and locked away and not have to stress about it. But watch this in the coming weeks. I'm backing Mark McVeigh to be selected as Essendon's next head coach. All the rounds broken down and spoken about. This is how the AFL ladder shapes up after 23 rounds and only 1 more round of the home and away season to go. In first place on 76 points, we have Fremantle. In second place on 68 points, we have Sydney. In third place, we have Brisbane. In fourth place, we have Hawthorn. And in fifth place, we have Melbourne, all equally on 60 points. Geelong then knocks on the door in sixth place on 56, who are tied with Adelaide, but the percentage difference of less than 5% means that Geelong are currently guaranteed a final spot. Adelaide need to fight for it. Trailing that, Collingwood are in 8th place on 52, the Bulldogs are in 9th place on 50, and Carlton are in 10th place on 46. That is our guaranteed top 10. A little bit of manoeuvring maybe from 3rd down to 10th, but it does look like in that first wildcard round, it is currently going to be the Bulldogs in Adelaide and Carlton and Collingwood, provided it's 9 versus 7 and 8 versus 10, because I don't think they'd do 7 and 10 and 8 and 9. But anyway, those 4 currently are the 4 that are going to be competing for that wild card spot. In 11th place on 40 points, we have St Kilda, equally tied with GWS in 12th on the same amount of points. North Melbourne sits in 13th on 36 points. Gold Coast sit in 14th on 32 points. Port Adelaide sit in 15th on 24 points. West Coast sit in 16th on 16 points. Richmond sit in 17th on 12 points. And Essendon sit in 18th on 8 points. With all the votes from round 23 tallied up, this is how my leaderboard heading into the final round of the home and away season looks. After I announce who wins the MVP award at the conclusion of the next round, I'm thinking of doing a vote system, coach style, like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for the final series. So if that's something you'd like to see, let me know. But this is how our top 10 looks heading into the final round of football. In 10th place on 18 votes is Patrick Cripps. In 9th place on 19 votes is Jai Newcomb, Jason Horne-Francis, and Lachie Neale. In 8th place on 21 votes is Nasiah Wanganeen-Malira. In 7th place on 22 votes is Zach Butters and Max Gawn. In 6th place on 23 votes is Jordan Dawson. In 5th place on 24 votes is Luke Jackson and Will Ashcroft. In 4th place on 27 votes is Marcus Bontempelli. In 4th place on 30 votes is Isaac Heaney. In 3rd place on 31 votes is Bailey Smith. In second place on 35 votes is Harry Sheasel. And in first place on 41 votes, can't lose it even if he sits this coming weekend out, is your MVP for the 2026 season from the Hip and Shoulder, from myself, Nick Dacos. And there is only one thing that can be done to officially wrap this round up. There is only one more thing to do to officially wrap up the round, and that is to announce my team of the week for round 23, which was really hard to piece together because there were many players that I voted for in their games this week that had players that play the same role that also got votes, or maybe didn't get votes, that I feel played better in that role. So some players still missed out, and I feel I'm stiffing players when it comes to this. But I think the team I selected this week is the best team that I could have potentially pieced together. I don't think I'm missing anybody, and if I did, it's a severe oversight on my end. But this is how my team of the week for round 23 presents itself. In defence, I have Lockie Ash and Lockie Whitfield in the back pockets and Cal Wilkie at full back, with Bradley Hill and Josh Dacos on the half-back flanks and Jacob Wiedering at centre half-back. In the midfield, I have Errol Goulden and Max Hall on the wings and Ed Richards in the centre, with Max Gawn in the ruck, Nick Dacos at ruck rover and Will Ashcroft in rover. My forward line has Bo McCreary and Isaac Heaney on the half-forward flanks and Jai Amos at centre half-forward, with Mitch Owens and Isaac Rankin in the forward pockets and Nick Larkey at full forward. On the interchange, I have Luke Jackson, Bailey Smith, Cade Chandler, George Hewitt, and Oliver Dempsey. Josh Fraser is this week's coach of the week, with the assistant coaches of the week being Craig McRae and Sam Mitchell. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, the round has officially been recapped for the second last time of the home and away season. To think this coming weekend is the final home and away round, I'm very upset about it, because that means we're going to see less teams playing, which means less football being played. And obviously with Richmond not playing, I've got to hedge my bets on another team. I think I'm going to be riding Fremantle all the way through the final series. I'd love to see them win one. For the wildcard contending teams, I think I'd love to see Collingwood get up. That's just my personal take. Hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, would appreciate it if you hit that like button down below. And if you're new around here, you want to get on board the community we are building, hit that subscribe button as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.